Hey there everyone, welcome back to Utility Sports for another 2025 NBA mock draft, the first one of 2025, and I'm extremely excited to be bringing more NBA content to you here. If you guys do enjoy, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more, hit that notification bell. Let's not waste any more time here and dive immediately into our video preview today. The draft order is based on the standings as of Monday, January 13th. Unfortunately, no mock draft Monday this week. We have mock draft Tuesday instead. And what I want you guys to do right now, I'm going to take 1 second here, comment down below your favorite team. Just let me know who you're a fan of. I know most of your guys' favorite teams. I read every single comment, but I'm going to be leaving a heart on every single message today with the name of an NBA team because I want to know who you're cheering for. Who are you waiting to see which team picks who? I want to see exactly who you're excited to see in this mock draft. And without further ado, let's jump into pick number 1 here. The Washington Wizards. And listen, they've been doing a lot of losing this season, but there is one thing I want to say about the Michael Winger, Will Dawkins regime here in Washington that will maybe give the Wizards fans some hope, and it really centers around their draft odds. The Wizards, with how much they've been losing and the direction of their tanking, playing so many young players, they're giving a ton of experience and opportunities for their young players to learn, and in the process of that, even though they do have some veterans on the roster, of course, you know, guys like Jonas Valanciunas, for example, a real trade team to watch over the next couple of weeks or so. Even though the Wizards do have some veterans, their veterans are not sacrificing or jeopardizing the Wizards' draft position. And I think that's something that's really important. Sometimes we see teams who try to bottom out. They don't end up bottoming out enough to get a top 3, top 4, top 5 pick. Think about the Utah Jazz over the last few years. Now, this year's been a little bit different. They've been playing more young guys. The Jazz haven't been good either. But the last couple of years of the Jazz rebuild has been almost uplifted too much by Lauri Markkanen, who's been an awesome player, and some other veterans, John Collins as well. So if you're a Washington Wizards fan, that's one real bright lining here, or white lining for the season, is something to be really happy about, is you're losing a lot. Your young players are getting experience. You're setting yourself up for the draft. And if the lottery gods do bless you here, the first overall pick of the 2025 NBA draft will be Cooper Flagg. A 42-point dominant showing over Notre Dame puts Cooper Flagg firmly at the top of not just some, but pretty much every single mock draft from here on out that you'll see on this channel and that you'll see from anywhere probably. Cooper Flagg, as I've talked about multiple times, including at the very beginning of the cycle, if you go back to my way too early mock draft, I stated that there's about a 99.9% chance that Cooper Flagg will be the first overall pick in 2025, and a lot of that stems from his defensive versatility. Now, I don't think he's a flawless defensive prospect. In fact, I think his point of attack defense right now is a little lackluster at times, especially against smaller, quicker players, but I think there's a lot of upside and room for him to grow in that area, especially with how long, athletic, and his shot block timing. I think there's going to be a real progression there for him defensively on the ball, out on the perimeter against quick players. But I think offensively is really where I want to center my discussion and analysis on him in this mock draft video. He has been utterly impressive. He is essentially leading Duke in pretty much every single statistic. He's been absolutely dominant when it comes to some of the advanced analytics. You look at his box plus minus as an example. He's been utterly insane for the Blue Devils this year. And I honestly think he's doing that in a role that is honestly probably a bit more expansive than maybe even the role he'll see all the time in the NBA. And I think it's really good, first of all, for his development. He has been playing that way. You look back to his Montverde Academy film, he was playing on the ball. That was one of the big questions going back to some of his, AAU play. Think about his time with Maine United. He was having the ball in his hands a lot, and people were wondering, is he a primary creator? Can he be an actual lead force for an NBA offense? And even though I think there are going to be some wrinkles along the way that do prove to be a little bit problematic building a perfect team around Cooper Flagg, I think his overall offensive game and his progression over the last 3 years or so as a prospect puts him at a spot now where not only is he going to be a good offensive prospect, he's a great offensive prospect. And people want to throw around the word generational. To me, Cooper Flagg isn't a generational prospect. I save that for prospects like Victor Wembanyama, like Luka Doncic, like LeBron James. Those are the true generational players that I think we've seen in the last 20 years or so. For me, Cooper Flagg is a high-end elite prospect. And that's not to, kind of downplay his talent at all. I think he's going to be a multiple-time All-Star, multiple-time All-NBA type player. He's got a significantly high ceiling and an incredibly high floor. And I think for a team like Washington here, we've talked about it at length in other mock drafts in the past, as the Wizards have constantly been at the top for me in these mock drafts. The Wizards with Alex Sarr, with some of their other young players, Bilal Coulibaly, Bilal Alcatraz, I love that nickname. Putting Cooper Flagg there in Washington is going to be awesome. It's going to be a fantastic thing to watch. And if he does ultimately land there, that defensive front court's going to be insane. And I think if Washington can find a way to add some real three-point shooting into their backcourt and another ball handler or two that is going to be a high-quality, high-caliber player, it makes Cooper Flagg this unique Swiss Army knife in doing a lot of things that he hasn't been given the complete opportunity to do yet. But I think in NBA spacing, his ability as a short roller, his ability as an actual long roller, if you want him to actually screen and roll, if Alex Sarr takes development steps forward as an actual shooter from three, there's going to be unique ways for Washington to stretch the floor if Cooper Flagg does ultimately find his way to DC. And I think this is an awesome fit defensively, specifically for the Washington Wizards, and I'm extremely excited for the long-term impact Cooper Flagg could have on a small market franchise like the Washington Wizards. Pick 2, we have the New Orleans Pelicans, obviously ravaged by injuries this year, but there have still been some great individual showings. Zion Williamson has had some flashes when he's been on the court this season, obviously some off-the-court issues and obviously health ones as well that have really centered around Zion Williamson's career. Unfortunately, CJ McCollum's had some career nights this year. DeJounte Murray's looked pretty good in stretches too. The Pelicans do have a lot of talent, and I think I'm really fascinated about the direction that New Orleans will ultimately decide to go at some point, whether they trade multiple veterans, if they just trade Brandon Ingram, do they even trade anyone, do they just continue to play this core out and say that over time maybe things will regress back to normal and return to a state where the Pelicans can be a playoff caliber team. We'll see what happens. But second overall, they have a real chance here to add talent. So with this pick, I have the New Orleans Pelicans selecting guard Dylan Harper from Rutgers, and a player who had shortly entered the conversation for the number 1 overall pick. Again, I didn't really waver much off of Cooper Flagg being the first overall selection, but the type of season Dylan Harper was having earlier in the year, I think points to some of the validation of who he is as a prospect. The fact that he is a very high quality, high caliber guard who has very good downhill finishing skills and honestly tremendous court vision. I think his feel, the ability to weaponize the weak side of the floor, this is kind of your ideal lead guard in a lot of ways. Now, he doesn't have necessarily the exact same size as a Cade Cunningham or Luka Doncic. He's not quite as big as those players, but he's got still tremendous positional size. He's going to be able to see over the top of defenses, deliver timely, accurate, precise passes, and he has the vision to really weaponize team defenses in a way that not every guard prospect has. And I think that's one of the most important things when you're evaluating a lead guard, a primary ball handler going into the NBA. How can they weaponize their scoring gravity to positively impact the rest of the team? And New Orleans is an interesting team given the makeup of their roster around this pick, right? They don't have all of these necessarily floor stretchers. Now, they do have some guys who can really shoot the rock, don't get me wrong, but their roster is just unique, especially with Yves Missi, Zion Williamson. Yves Missi's been really good this year, by the way. I want to give him a shout out quick here for my Pelicans fans watching. Dylan Harper, I just think from a talent perspective, this is who New Orleans has to take. Yes, they just traded for DeJounte Murray. Yes, they have CJ McCollum. It's kind of a weird, interesting fit. It's not the most obvious fit in the world, but given New Orleans' kind of long-term struggles to be a team that actually wins playoff games, wins playoff series, they just haven't done that in a really long time. So I think just grabbing talent, taking a player who can be a build-around cornerstone for a franchise, that's the way you have to go. And Dylan Harper, for me, is the second overall pick for the New Orleans Pelicans. Pick number 3, the Toronto Raptors here now, a team that has also been losing a ton. And with the eyes on the draft here for Toronto, I think Raptors fans still have a lot to be excited about. There's a decent infrastructure of talent already in place. Scotty Barnes is, a kind of fringe all-star caliber player. They do have some other nice pieces. RJ Barrett's been playing relatively well. I think Grady Dick, has emerged this season in a way for them that I'm really excited about, given how I felt about him coming out of Kansas. And I think for Toronto specifically, if they're looking to implement more talent onto this roster, I think one thing that they could really use is a player who can tie everything together offensively, and that's a high volume ball handler who can really manipulate the pick and roll at a high level, and I think that's going to mesh really well with the rest of this roster. Third overall, I have the Toronto Raptors selecting guard Kasparas Jakucionis out of Illinois. And I do have some concerns about Jakucionis, but I want to focus first on the positives. He is a premier ball handler, one of the better decision makers in the draft when it comes to actually handling the basketball, making live reads out of a pick and roll, and the pick and pop. And I think that's one of the opportunities that Illinois has really afforded him, given the talent on their roster. You know, they have some real shooters with Hummerkaus and Ivisic in the front court. They have guys who they've been able to run Spain actions, roll and replace actions. They've been able to run a variety of pick and pop looks. They run a lot of horn sets. And all of that experience is really functional things that are going to provide kind of a building block for Jakucionis going into the NBA. Those are all NBA type of sets. And with the talent around him, including Will Riley as well, he has floor spacers, he has wings around him, where I think the translation to the NBA on a slightly bigger court with more spacing, more talent, more shooting even than what he presently has, it's going to be a really big positive for Kasparas Jakucionis in the NBA. And I think, you know, getting someone like Grady Dick next to him in Toronto is going to be a tremendous pairing. Think about Grady Dick being your Spain screener, your ghost screener, having him be your replace guy and roll and replace actions. There's so many different things. He can be your ram screener. There's a lot of different ways that Toronto's going to be able to weaponize Jakucionis' ball feel with some of their already existing talent on the roster. One of them being Scotty Barnes. You look at the way that Atlanta plays, with Trae Young being so ball dominant and Jalen Johnson playing as a short roll guy off of that, and the success that they can find even with another non-shooter on the floor in Clint Capella for most of the game. I think if you want to put Scotty Barnes into a roll, short roll type of role, and have, you know, Jakob Poeltl playing out of the dunker spot, that's something that could operate pretty well, I think, with Jakucionis' game. He's shooting over 40% from three, a lot of that coming off the dribble, pull-up threes, step-back threes, NBA type of looks. Now, obviously the defense is going to be better in the NBA. The athleticism is just a step above where it is in college basketball. And I do have concerns about Jakucionis as a primary ball handler in isolation. How quick is he actually with the handle? Now, he does have a really good selection of counter moves with his footwork. I really like his stride stop. I like a lot of things from a footwork perspective for him. But when it comes to his actual handle, the crossover, the behind the back, things like that, I do have some concerns about his ability to consistently beat his man off the dribble downhill. I do think he's presently a little reliant on screens to get open and to create space, but I think the one positive here, like I've talked about with Toronto, they have the roster to probably fit with that pretty well. So Jakucionis, even though there are some flaws in his game as a prospect, I still think Toronto's a tremendous landing spot, and this would be a very good pairing between prospect and organization in the 2025 NBA draft. Moving on to pick for the Charlotte Hornets, a team that has some talent, especially LaMelo Ball. Brandon Miller obviously been a little bit more up and down this season. I think the Hornets are such an interesting team because when Mark Williams has played, they've been a lot better. Their defense has been much better, specifically in the new year as well. I think it really points to the signs of how important a front court is for a team. If you don't have a quality center, if you don't have a great front court, if you don't have elite center depth, it's very, very hard to win in the NBA. And that's something that when Mark Williams has been out has really plagued the Hornets in a lot of ways. You know, you see Taj Gibson rolling and you're like, there's no rim pressure there. He's not a threat at all. That's something that hurts LaMelo Ball. That's something that hurts the Hornets. So I think even though this team right now is at a spot where they need more front court talent, they're also at a spot in the draft where taking a center might not just be the option for them. Now, obviously, the lottery could come into play here. This order is going to change. So if the Hornets slide down a little bit, maybe we do see them actually take a true center. But fourth overall, I think there's another option out there that could be pretty interesting long-term for the Charlotte Hornets. With this pick, I have the Hornets selecting forward Ace Bailey from Rutgers. And this is the most polarizing prospect in the 2025 NBA draft. We have people who look at the analytics and are saying this guy's got bust written all over him. There's people who are the eye test watchers and say that boy nice. He's going to be able to make shots over the top of the defense. And I find myself right in the middle of both. I don't really know what to think. Every single day, I've watched so much film on Ace Bailey. I pretty much watch every single offensive touch he's had this season. I don't know what to think. Part of me is really fascinated with his shot making. and the upside, the athleticism, and just the overall shot diet, even though it's a really tough shot diet, and when you actually watch the games, you're like, oh my gosh, why is he settling for that one dribble pull-up jump shot over 2 defenders? Why does he not swing the ball? Why can he not do this? There's a lot of flaws when I watch him. His weakness list might be longer than any top 10 pick in this draft, but some of the strengths are so magnetizing, honestly, that it leaves you really excited about what he could become with the right coaching, with the right development. And I think Charles Lee would be such an interesting landing spot for him as a coach because of how obsessed he is with the three-point volume. You think about his role with the Boston Celtics a year ago. He knows the importance of the three-point shot, and we've seen it with Charlotte's players, with LaMelo Ball, Brandon Miller specifically shooting a ton of threes. You think about Ace Bailey's shot diet right now, and if you can kind of change that, turn that into a heavier three-point shot diet, the upside is immense just with his shot-making potential, even with the difficulty of shot attempts that he's had this year. And some of them are utterly ridiculous shots that you think on film, Rutgers coaching staff would be saying, never ever shoot this again. He just is still finding some success. It's not like his field goal percentage is absolutely in the trash. His three-point percentage isn't terrible. His true shooting percentage, it's not sexy, but it's not the worst thing ever either. So it's one of those things where I'm seeing people say that he shouldn't be a top 10 pick. I'm seeing people say he definitely can't be a top 5 pick. For me, I'm kind of at a spot where I think the top 3 has solidified itself a little bit with Cooper Flagg, Dylan Harper, Kasparas, Jakucionis. And then I find myself in a predicament where pick 4 could be a variety of different players. And the upside of Ace Bailey with his size, length, athleticism, and shot-making profile, he could really solidify himself still as a top 4 pick in the 2025 NBA draft. Of course, we still have a lot of this cycle to go. Don't hold me to that right now. This is not a big board. This is a mock draft. But as of right now, I think the Hornets would strongly consider Ace Bailey 4th overall. Moving on to pick 5, the Utah Jazz, a team that could probably use a wing. They could also use a lead guard at this point in time. You know, Isaiah Collier just had a very good game a couple nights ago, including a game winner. I still think the Jazz are at a spot where they're looking for a lot of different answers for their starting lineup long term and for their build around cornerstone pieces. 5th overall, they might have a chance to add to that here. With this selection, I have the Utah Jazz taking Trey Johnson from Texas. And his shot profile is also very fascinating. He doesn't get to the rim much. He doesn't draw a ton of fouls, I think, as a byproduct of the rim volume. And if you're looking for superstar upside, you're probably looking for a player who maybe has a little bit more of a 3-level game to his style and the ability to get to the line, generate easy baskets. But one thing about Trey Johnson, some of the shots that he's able to make, he makes them look easy. With the three-point shot diet, the ability to consistently make a high volume of three-pointers. And, you know, everyone, the discussion around the NBA right now specifically centers around, our team shooting too many threes? Do we like the style? This and the other thing. Listen, it's not going away. The NBA is not going to tell teams stop shooting threes. And when they have a player like Trey Johnson available to them who is an absolute flamethrower from behind the three-point line on difficult shot attempts, there's going to be significant intrigue. Trey Johnson has hovered around and in my top 10 for most of the draft cycle. Here he's moving up even a little bit further into the top 5 with some movement as some other prospects after getting into more difficult stretches of their season have kind of fizzled out a little bit, maybe fallen down the board just a bit. Trey Johnson has, I think, really solidified himself. One of my big questions for him this year at Texas was if he could sustain the efficiency on the volume and difficulty of his shot attempts, and he has done that. So with some of my questions for him at the early stages of the season, he's answered them, and he's answered them resoundingly well. So I think with the type of year he's having, he's going to be a top 10 pick. And I think Utah, who's looking for raw talent, scoring upside, and self-creation profiles, I think Trey Johnson's a player who could definitely fit into that. They still need a lot more help. This isn't going to solve everything for Utah, but this is a significant talent acquisition for them and someone who can really shoot the lights out of the basketball. And I'm assuming coming into the NBA, he's going to find a ton of success doing just that. Pick number 6, the Brooklyn Nets. What an effective tank season it has been for them. They were able to build up the stock for players like Dennis Schroeder, Dorian Finney-Smith. We also have Cam Johnson, who will get traded at some point, I'm sure. The Nets have done everything perfectly here. They've built up their profile of draft compensation. They were able to get veterans out the door after having them play a very pivotal and successful role for Jordi Fernandez. all in the process of still losing enough games to have a real shot at the first, second, or third overall pick in the 2025 NBA draft. So kudos to the Brooklyn Nets. I think everything is going perfectly for them, honestly, this year for the long-term outlook of their team. And with the 6th overall pick, I have the Nets selecting guard VJ Edgecombe from Baylor. And I think one of the most fascinating things about Brooklyn here, we don't know what they're going to look to do in the top 15, top 20 picks. I don't remember the last time this team had a top 10 pick. You think about the Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving saga. Before that, they, of course, leased and mortgaged their entire future for Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett, and Jason Terry. Those things did not go very well. They were sending top 2, top 3 picks out the door. Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown. Obviously, not a great trade in hindsight. I think we all know that now. So we don't really know what Sean Marks is going to look to do with a top pick. But I think if you're trying to idealize some of the potential avenues, first of all, there's Giannis Antetokounmpo rumors. Do the Nets want him? If they do, would they look to try and draft a player who's a little bit more ready to compete and to try and help them win immediately? That would be an interesting way for Brooklyn to build. Or could they go with the long-term, high upside, high ceiling player? And that's what I have them doing here with VJ Edgecombe, a player who has produced some significant flashes this season. Now, he has yet to put everything together on a consistent basis. There have been some awesome, and I mean really awesome moments. If you want to have fun watching someone just from a highlight perspective, VJ Edgecombe might be a top 2 or 3 prospect in this class just from a highlights component, right? I'm not saying he's top 2 or 3 on my board. He's not. But some of the things he's done, there was a play a couple weeks ago where he split a double team with a kind of a behind the back, through the legs move to get between the double team. It was incredible. Some of the blocks he's had this season as a chase down guy. You think about his dunk on Gonzaga's head coach's son earlier in the season. Just some impressive, really impressive moments from VJ Edgecombe overall this year. And I think for Baylor specifically, he hasn't, again, been their best player. He hasn't been the most productive freshman in the nation by any stretch. But there's been enough flashes with the athleticism. He's a tools and traits player, and I think there's so many tools and traits for a team to work with. And I think given the fact that Brooklyn has their head coach of the future in Jordi Fernandez, someone who I believe can maximize talent. We've seen the success he had this year with the Brooklyn Nets already around guys like Dorian Finney-Smith and Dennis Schroeder, who I referenced earlier. The Nets know what they're doing now. They have a coach who's going to be able to make things flow, make things work, and to get the most out of his players. And I think from a developmental standpoint, if you're looking for production, Jordi Fernandez is going to be able to get guys to produce. And I think a player like VJ Edgecombe is going to be such a fascinating long-term development project for him there with the Nets. Pick number 7, the Portland Trailblazers here now on the clock. Another team that is very, very fascinating. They have a collection of young talent. You think about some of their pieces that they have. Obviously, Toumani Camara's progressing into one of the better perimeter defenders in the NBA. Donovan Clingan's been awesome this year in his limited minutes. Scoot Henderson, when Chauncey Billups wasn't coaching, looked a lot better. I'm not shocked by that. I think the Blazers are a head coach away from becoming a much more competitive team. The Deni Avdija trade was a pretty creative way to get some more young talent on their roster. I think overall, Portland has a lot of pieces, so it's not easy to find at pick 7 in this draft exactly what they need or exactly who they could go after. But I landed on prospect here that I do think could make some long-term sense for them still from a shot profile perspective. So 7th overall, I have the Portland Trailblazers here selecting guard Boogie Fland from Arkansas. And there has been a long history of Kentucky guards thriving and really succeeding in the NBA after first playing for Coach Calipari. His ability to recruit talent, his eye for talent at the high school level obviously is extremely successful. He has a very long track record of producing very good NBA players. And the question is, does that translate to Arkansas? And if so, which team is going to be smart enough to take that player specifically from Calipari's system? And Boogie Fland, I think, is one of the more fascinating prospects from a first step, shot creation, handle, and then downhill field component. He's just got a little bit of everything in his game. I like his ability to generate shots for himself off of a live dribble. He's got the space creator ability where, he's got a couple of different moves he can go to, whether it be, maybe a little bit of a step back or kind of stop and pop in his game. And then he has the feel. He's hit numerous cuts this year. I really like his synergy with Adou Thiero, who we're going to talk about here in about 10, maybe 15 picks or so. We'll see where he falls in this mock draft. But Boogie Fland is a player I do like quite a bit. And now maybe 7 feels a little bit high. I'm sure that's higher than where you're going to see him in some other mock drafts. But again, for Portland, it's hard to find exactly who they're going to look to draft because of what they already have on the roster. I didn't want to go big man because they drafted Klingon last year. Yeah, I don't really want to go guard because they have Scoot Henderson, but at the end of the day, talent wins, and I think Boogie Fland is really, really talented, and I think right now his stock is being undersold nationally with how others are talking about him as an NBA draft prospect. Moving on to pick number 8, the Oklahoma City Thunder here now. This pick, funny enough, is a result of the Al Horford salary dump from the Philadelphia 76ers. Sam Presti working his devil's magic here, gets a top 10 pick potentially in the 2025 draft. This pick is top 6 protected, so we'll see if it actually conveys or not. There's a lot that can change yet in the season, we'll see. But the Thunder here, 8th overall, I have them selecting center Derik Queen from Maryland. And I'm sure some Thunder fans are already typing, we don't need a center. We have Isaiah Hartenstein. We have Chet Holmgren. And I completely understand that. But listen, the Thunder are loaded. They extended Alex Caruso. They have Lou Dort. They have Isaiah Joe. They have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Jalen Williams. This team is extremely talented. They drafted one of my favorite players in last year's draft, in AJ Mitchell, who's been awesome for them as a rookie as well. There's been so many great standout players for Oklahoma City. So yes, even though you probably don't need another big man, especially one who hasn't shot the 3 ball especially well yet this season for Maryland, he's done a lot of other great things, and he's one of the more unique players in terms of the ability to dribble, pass, and shoot. Now, he's not shooting the 3 very well, like I just said, but he's shooting long 2s really well, and that maybe points to some of the long-term development that could be in the near distant, maybe not so distant future for Derik Queen moving forward. And I think if you look at how OKC plays, the ability to stretch the floor, attack closeouts, generate closeouts by driving and kicking the basketball, Derik Queen's someone who can maybe fit into that system really, really well. And listen, if you want to win in the Western Conference, you're going to have to beat some teams with size. Dallas has size. Denver has size. Adding another player into the front court I don't think would be problematic for Oklahoma City. Again, worst case, you have him play a lot of G League minutes early in his career, get him to a spot where you think he can be a very reliable contributor. And not only now do you have depth in case one of Chet Holmgren or Isaiah Hartenstein's out for a while, you're now at a spot where maybe you can play him as the 4. Maybe you can play Chet Holmgren and Derik Queen together and have such a unique front court with added length, size, rim protection, and honestly just overall talent. He's a talented big man, and I think OKC, one thing that they do really well and why Sam Presti's such a great drafter, he drafts talent. And I've talked about this at length so many times in the past, but drafting good basketball players is just a very smart thing to do. Teams look at potential, they look at upside. Oh, this guy's raw. What if he becomes this, that? What if he suddenly improves magically? What if he, drinks some magic potion and becomes a great basketball player? OKC doesn't do that. They look and say, this guy's really good at basketball. We don't really care if he's 21, 22, 19, 18 years of age. We care if he's good at basketball because that's what we're drafting for. The Thunder do that really, really well, honestly better than anybody. And I think if Derik Queen's available for them 8th overall, they'll run this pick up to the podium and be very happy with the long-term results, giving him some time to develop behind Isaiah Hartenstein and Chet Holmgren. Pick number 9, the Chicago Bulls here now. And Chicago, a team that I think would have been a great Derik Queen landing spot given the long-term questions about Nikola Vucevic's future there. Will he get traded? Will he not? We'll see. But the Bulls are at a spot here where, again, they're looking for talent. They're looking for front court play. And they're still a very, very talented player who is extremely large as a human being. And I think that's something that would be tremendous for Chicago to target here 9th overall. With this pick, I have the Chicago Bulls selecting center Khaman Maluach from Duke. And I think there's been so many things that have really impressed me with his play this season for the Blue Devils. Early in the year specifically, it was his motor defensively, making plays at the rim. Now listen, he had a long way to go as a developmental prospect in terms of some of the fundamentals and techniques of what he needs to be great at in terms of his drop coverage positioning, his off-ball positioning IQ. But the upside was obvious early on because of his ability to recover, the sheer length and size, the ability to block shots at the rim. And I'm not just talking like, wow, he made like a nice rotation and blocked someone. These are thunderous blocks I'm talking about. And then offensively, some of the things that have really impressed me the most, and one thing I wasn't really sure what we were going to see this year, his touch at the rim is really, really good. He's been a high volume lob finisher for Duke. He's shooting, I believe, like 80% from the floor right now, and a lot of it stems from being a rim roller, playing out of the dunker spot, catching and finishing. He's got a great combination, and this is one of the most underrated things for big men specifically. How good are his hands? Does he catch tight window passes? Does he have the ability to catch in traffic, finish above traffic, finish at the rim when there's contests? What if his guy doesn't really leave his body? Does he still have the play strength to fit and functionally make plays in those situations? And I think for the most part, I've been very, very impressed. Now, it's not like he's out there averaging 20 points per game or anything. He doesn't have necessarily the production of someone like Derik Queen, but he's been in a role next to Cooper Flagg, next to Knueppel. He's been in an NBA-styled role, and he's found a lot of success in that role. And I think for Chicago specifically, putting a big man like this who can be a real lob threat next to Josh Giddey, next to Kobe White, someone who can be a screener role, rim protection big, this is the archetype of player I think the Bulls should really be looking for if they can't get their hands on an elite stretch big long-term. Khaman Maluach is a player who can fit really, really well there in Chicago. Big Ten, the San Antonio Spurs on the clock now. First of all, I want to give Victor Wembanyama his flowers. If you go back to my mock draft cycles and all my big boards back from the 2023 NBA draft, I lamented how elite, how generational of a prospect he was. He's going to be on MVP ballots this season. That's how good he's been. Now, I know the Spurs haven't necessarily translated all of that to elite team success, but they've been much, much better this year. What I deemed it as before the season started was competitive tanking. They're trying to win games, but they're also not trying to push all of their chips in at the same time. And that's exactly where the Spurs are now, picking 10th overall. They have the opportunity to add more talent in this year's draft. And with this selection, I have the Spurs selecting Knueppel from Duke. I just referenced him a second ago when I was talking about Khaman Maluach. Knueppel is really, really intriguing. He started the year off on fire. Had some incredible performances through the first 3 or 4 games of the season, then maybe hit a little bit of a lull for a little bit. And I think he's found a very good balance of not only just his shot diet, but his productivity as well. John Shire's been using Knueppel again in a very pro-styled role, a role that Knueppel will be asked to play in the NBA as a movement shooter, an off-ball threat who can, kind of add wrinkles, add complexities to an NBA offense to force team defenses into binds. And I think putting this type of player around Stephon Castle, around Victor Wembanyama, around Jeremy Sohan, there's so many obvious long-term benefits from just putting a great shooting prospect, and that's exactly what Knueppel is here. He's a great shooting prospect, someone who very, very simply is going to step into the NBA. If you overplay him off of a stagger screen or an off-ball flare, he's going to be able to rip and go. He can get to the rim. He can pass a little bit off of some of those live ball reads that he needs to make. Now, I'm not saying he's the best passing prospect. He's not the best driver of the basketball, but his shooting and exactly what the scouting report is going to say, every team's going to have him circled as a shooter, someone you have to close out hard on. He's got the ancillary skills to build off of that and to continue to round out his game and positively impact winning even when he's not making three-point shots, which I think is such an important tool or trait for three-point shooting prospects. If they can do other things for you, that's really good. Knueppel's got solid positional size. He's just, I think, a really well-rounded, solid player with an A-plus trait in terms of his shooting, something that's going to be a standout skill for him throughout his entire NBA career. And for San Antonio, the more shooting, the better. It's just the reality of the NBA. You need three-point shooting. You need guys who can open up wrinkles and wiggles into your offense. If you want to use him as a ghost screener, Spain screener, if you want to use him as a rip screen guy, whatever you want to use him as, there's so many options, right? And I think Knueppel specifically, with his experience he's gotten this year for Duke, being in those roles all the time has been really good for him, and I think it makes him a very pro-ready prospect as well as a solid long-term bet for the Spurs around their core nucleus of young talent already in-house. Pick 11, we're going to stay on the topic of the Spurs. So not only do they just go with Knueppel now, but they have this pick from the Atlanta Hawks as a byproduct of the original DeJounte Murray trade. And now at this point in time, the Spurs have the opportunity to build off the Knueppel pick. They get a shooter. What other play styles, what other archetypes could the Spurs be looking for? 11th overall, I have the San Antonio Spurs selecting forward Asa Newell from Georgia. It was a not well-kept secret that the Spurs were interested in Tidjane Salaün in the 2024 NBA draft. I think luckily for them, that did not come to fruition. I was not a huge Tidjane Salaün fan, but Asa Newell might be the better version of what they were hoping to get with Salaün because of his defensive versatility, both very similar length, size, physical traits, and has been a much more productive player in college than I think Tidjane Salaün would have been. Obviously played overseas, different role, different system, everything. It's hard to compare those two prospects together, but I think Asa Newell is a player who's been extremely productive. Now the three-point shot has been shaky, not a high volume of threes either. So listen, the Spurs, even though they just went with a three-point shooter, I still think the more threes the better for them around Victor. But Asa Newell specifically is a guy who the Spurs are rumored to have interest in size. They're rumored to have interest in athletic foremen, and that's exactly what Asa Newell can be. I like his rim finishing diet. He's extremely productive. He's got pretty good touch around the rim, and I think the defensive versatility is really what stands out. He's going to have some switchability to him. He can guard out on the perimeter a bit. He can provide some extra added rim protection around Wembanyama. Not that the Spurs really need much more of that, given how Wembanyama's been blocking shots this year and deterring guys at the rim at an all-time level. But nonetheless, Newell, again, size, finishing, defensive versatility, those are some of the key traits that I think the Spurs would be looking at if they did draft Newell 11th overall from the Georgia Bulldogs. Pick number 12, the Houston Rockets here. Now with this pick from the Phoenix Suns, we'll see if the Rockets actually hold on to this pick or not. There's a lot of trade rumors circulating. Maybe even in the offseason, could they go after a guy like Devin Booker, who I've talked at length about? We'll see. But the Rockets have been nothing short of excellent this season. And if you're a Rockets fan, you've got to be excited. The play of Alperen Sengun, who really deserves some all-star selection looks at the very least. Jalen Green, who I think has been vastly improved this season defensively. And then also I think has turned a corner as of late in terms of just being an overall player. I think his offensive decision-making has been a bit better. This team's just clicking. And they've been doing it with some injuries. Jabari Smith out, Tari Eason out for a little while. This team is just really, really good. You know, they had a really nice win going into Memphis the other night. Short-handed, they take down the Grizzlies on the road. Another good win. The Rockets have been awesome. And a lot of it stems from the coaching staff. Ime Udoka was a great hire, something I've been very optimistic about for a while. Given, you know, kind of his history with Boston, the ability to build an elite defense. But this offense is really good. And also, Amen Thompson, you guys know how much I loved him a couple drafts ago in 2023. Oh my goodness, what a player he's blossoming into. The Rockets are incredibly wealthy in terms of talent right now. And they get to add some more of it here too. 12th overall, I have them selecting forward Liam McNeeley from UConn. The one thing that the Rockets are not very good at is shooting the three ball. And listen, that's what's going to happen when you have, first of all, a very heavy three-point shot diet on pull-up threes. Not all threes are created equal. Fred VanVleet, Jalen Green both do shoot a lot of pull-up threes. And you also look at some of their catch-and-shoot guys. Dylan Brooks, even though he's been shooting the three relatively well for his standards this year, he's still not a premier 1A catch-and-shoot option, right? Jayshawn Tate shooting a bunch of corner threes is not going to allow your team to rank in the top 10 in three-point percentage. And that's been, I think, one of the glaring flaws still with Houston. Now, listen, long-term help is on the way. Reed Shepherd, when he gets an uptick in his role with the Rockets, I think the three-point percentage is going to trend forward. But Liam McNeeley's a player who I think could really fit in here for Houston, because one thing that stands out to me every time I watch the Rockets play, which is a lot, you know, I don't want them to jeopardize their defense. I don't want them to jeopardize ball contain and their ability to impact shots at the rim, the length, size component that they have on their roster presently. McNeeley's big. He rebounds the ball really well. He's got long arms. I think he's going to be a better defender than most people give him credit for as a prospect. Now, listen, he is still going to be a guy who gets targeted, like flat out, I'm going to say it. He's white. That's not going to help him a ton in terms of, you know, not being targeted on an NBA court defensively. But I think he's got the requisite size, athleticism, physical components to be a quality team defender, and he can really shoot the ball. That was what he did a ton for Montverde Academy next to Cooper Flagg a couple years back, and what he's been doing for UConn relatively well this year as well. He's been productive. He gets on the glass, like I mentioned. And I think this is just a really safe, solid pick to address, I still think, a big need for the Houston Rockets, which remains to be their three-point shooting. I think this is an upgrade over Jayshawn Tate. I think this could be, you know, with how deep the Rockets are, this isn't going to be super high minutes immediately, but this could be a long-term play for the Rockets to continue implementing and adding more shooting around Alperen Sengun and whichever star player happens to land in Houston over the next 12 to 18 months. The Golden State Warriors at pick 13, after a tremendous start to the season, they have fallen off just a bit. Some of that might stem from Buddy Hield. Warriors fans going through the Buddy Hield cycle has been fascinating. Now, I still think Buddy Hield's a solid player, but when he does not have a good shooting night, things do not look pretty. So the Warriors still looking to add talent. We'll see which way they go here. 13th overall, I have them selecting guard Jeremiah Fears from Oklahoma. Really fascinating draft prospect, one that I think is going to end up being really divisive by the end of the draft cycle. Right now, everyone's kind of on the buzz. You know, you remember the game-winning three-pointer with the 4-point play. You remember some of the big moments. I want people to pump the brakes just a little bit on Jeremiah Fears. I think he would be really well served staying another year in college, seeing some of those efficiencies grow. Right now, I want you guys to look up his three-point percentage, and you tell me if you think that's a lead guard in the NBA who doesn't have elite positional size, doesn't have elite downhill force, doesn't have elite athleticism. You tell me if that's a guy you're going to try and build a franchise around. Because if you're taking someone in the top 5, top 6 picks, you're hoping that's a franchise cornerstone. I'm not sure if I'm there on Jeremiah Fears. I think there's a lot of upside. I think there's a lot of room for him to grow. Listen, percentages don't tell the whole story, right? So even if you just looked up his three-point percentage, you're like, wow, that's a little bit lower than I thought it was going to be. It doesn't mean he's a horrible three-point shooter, but it does point to a lot of room for improvement. And I think that's really where I'm at with Jeremiah Fears. I think he's a player who, with the right long-term development, could become an awesome player in the NBA, but it's going to take a bit of time for him to get to those benchmarks for him being a super productive NBA player, just given the difficulty of his shot diet at times. And I also urge people, when you're watching Oklahoma play, watch what Jeremiah Fears is doing when he doesn't have the ball. How often does he cut? How active is he without the basketball in his hands? Now, he's been very timely defensively at moments this year. He's made plays defensively. I think that's a very good indication of talent, IQ, awareness, and anticipation skills. Something I think Jeremiah Fears has all of those things, which helps him be an NBA level prospect in my eyes. But offensively, there's moments where he just, I don't want to say looks disengaged, but is he going to be a super high quality off-ball player? I don't know. Now for Golden State, if you're drafting him, you're maybe looking at him being the future lead ball handler for your team post Steph Curry. Now, we'll see how long that takes. Post Steph Curry might not be for a while, just given how great of a shooter is. He's going to have maybe an extended duration of the end of his career. We'll see. But Jeremiah Fears is a player who I think right now a lot of people you're going to see put in the top 5, top 6. I'm just not sure if I'm there yet with him. And I do have some concerns about him as an overall prospect, despite some of the dazzling plays we've seen from him throughout the year on a very good Oklahoma team. 14th overall, the Detroit Pistons here now. Let's shout out the Pistons, man. This team has been playing very, very well, winning a lot of games. Cade Cunningham has really come into his own. First of all, prayers to Jaden Ivey as well. What a devastating injury. He had come into his own this year. One of the more improved players in the NBA, in my opinion. Even though the statistics don't necessarily point to that, I think just the overall productivity and just the eye test watching him play, I was so impressed with him. Again this season, I think just taking a pretty significant step forward as a player in winning basketball. Tobias Harris has been very good for the Pistons, something that I should eat some crow on. I was not in love with that signing and the amount of money they paid him, but he's been very, very good for them. So something I'll eat crow on there. The Pistons here, 14th overall, I have them selecting forward Noah Essengue from Ulm, a player who has been extremely productive as a 17-year-old playing professional basketball overseas for most of the season. He is an interesting and intriguing long-term prospect. Now, from a flaws perspective, I've talked about it at length in previous videos, but I think the functional play strength is not good. I think he's 2 years away from being a real rotation player in the NBA because of his strength. Now, he's long, athletic, he offers good size, he's been a player who's been able to finish above the rim, shoot the three a bit. There is a ton of real potential, and I think potential that can seriously be realized. But I think a lot of it will stem from him getting in the weight room, becoming a much more physically imposing player, and that will take some time. And that's okay. I think Detroit, with their current infrastructure of young players, I don't think that they need to necessarily rush into stepping on the accelerator in terms of draft picks. Obviously, they'll find ways to improve their roster, whether that be through the trade market, free agency, whatever way they end up ultimately exploring, they have a bunch of different avenues open to them. But Essengue is a guy who I think if you're drafting him, you can't expect him to be a top 7 player in your rotation immediately. I think he's going to need some serious G League time. I think he's going to need some serious, development in terms of just his overall body. And I still think the skill development needs to come a long way too. I don't trust him as a real creator of any offense right now. I think he's more of a play finisher, which is okay. Around Cade Cunningham, that's what I think Detroit would be looking for, which is why I'm mocking him here to the Pistons at 14. But nonetheless, I think Essengue has a lot of room to grow still as a player in both a good and a bad way. In a bad way, I mean it like, I don't think he's an NBA level player right now. But what I do also mean is I think he's got a ton of NBA level traits, and I do think he has some NBA level skills. So I think it's going to be really fascinating and a really important developmental period for Noah Essengue over the next 24 to 36 months, both now and post-draft moving forward. Pick 15, the Atlanta Hawks here now picking because of the Sacramento Kings' recent win streak. This pick has a top 12 protection on it. But the Kings, after firing Mike Brown, have gone on a winning streak. Domantas Sabonis has been playing tremendously well. And the Hawks might reap the benefits of that with an extra first-round pick in the 2025 draft. 15th overall, I have the Atlanta Hawks selecting guard Egor Demin from BYU. And I think Egor is an extremely fascinating prospect for me, someone who we have seen him featured in the top 10 in previous mock drafts. Now, he's a player, I kind of referenced this earlier, as the strength of schedule has ramped up, his productivity, his efficiencies have all dropped and plummeted in some ways. But I don't necessarily think that's an indication of his overall talent level. And what I mean by that, if you watch film, if you're actually watching these games, Egor Demin, he comes off a ball screen, he is getting blitzed hard. He is facing defensive coverages that not every NBA draft prospect faces. And some of that stems from the talent he has around him. And I think for BYU, first of all, this is going to be extremely fascinating to watch as AJ Dybantsa joins the program next year. What kind of coverages does Dybantsa face for BYU because of the talent level around him? We'll see what happens. Now, BYU is going to continue improving their recruiting classes. I think they're going to continue to upgrade their talent year over year. So it might not be as problematic for Dybantsa going into the 2026 draft as it is for Demin right now in the 2025 draft. But nonetheless, I still think from a talent perspective, Demin makes a ton of sense here for Atlanta with how heliocentric the Atlanta Hawks offense is with Trae Young. He had a 20-20 night the other night. 24 points, 20 assists, had a game winner from beyond half court. Trae Young is a brilliant NBA player. Honestly, brilliant. One of the best passers in the league. If you look at the gap in assists right now between him and the next best in the NBA, it's huge. He's been awesome this year. So I'm not suggesting that the Hawks need to play less of that style. I actually really like that style of play for them given the talent that they have on their roster right now and the surrounding collection of pieces that they have. I think they have to play that way, and that's why Quinn Snyder's doing that for them. But I do also think that Demin specifically, if you're looking for someone to be maybe early in his career a backup, a secondary creator for them when Trae Young comes off the floor, that's something I think Demin could excel at as another high volume, high pick and roll player, someone who could probably with more talent around him playing next to Jalen Johnson would be a godsend for Egor Demin right now, given how his season has gone at BYU and the kind of talent he has around him. Putting him next to more NBA talent would be better. I talked earlier about Jakucionis having some awesome shooters, awesome floor spacers, awesome talent around him for Illinois. Egor Demin doesn't have all of those things. Now, he's not probably as good of a prospect either as Jakucionis, just point blank, but I do think as the year's gone on, we've seen some real positives from Demin that should keep him in the first round discussion for teams. And I think a team like Atlanta here could maximize his talent, kind of putting him into their system and allowing him to be almost Trae Young 2.0, obviously a lesser version of that, but playing in the same kind of capacity and role in the Hawks offense when Trae Young's out of the game. Pick number 16, the Utah Jazz here now. With this pick stemming from the Minnesota Timberwolves trade for Rudy Gobert, the Jazz, after drafting earlier Trey Johnson out of Texas, they have a chance to come back here, add another player in the draft, including one more later on in this mock draft as well. The Jazz 16th overall select guard Ben Saraf from Ulm. We talked about his teammate a couple of picks ago in Noah Essengue. Ben Saraf is the guy who makes things go, makes things run for Ulm. right now. You think about the style of play that Ratiopharm plays with, the heavy dosage of ball screens. Ben Saraf comes into the NBA with a significant advantage over other NBA draft prospects in terms of the sheer volume of repetitions he's had as an on-ball, high-screen type of player, because you look back at his FIBA U18 play for Israel, where he took home world honors, world MVP essentially, with his play for Israel. And then you also look at the role he's been playing as a lead ball handler, lead decision maker for Ulm. He's going to have the ball in his hands a ton. He has had the ball in his hands a ton, and it's given him really good opportunities to grow and expand as a decision maker and an offensive creator. And I think for the Jazz specifically, they got the upside scorer with Trey Johnson. Now they come back and get a guy who can be a lead ball handler for them, a player who I trust with the ball in his hands quite a bit more than anyone else they have on their roster right now. It doesn't mean they don't have talent, but I don't think Keontae George is a true lead point guard. I don't think that Isaiah Collier is good enough to be a lead guard in the NBA. Look at some of his efficiencies this year. The advanced numbers on him do not look pretty. Not surprised by that. Ben Saraf, I think, is a player who, with his positional size, the ability to weaponize the weak side of the floor. I talked about that earlier with Dylan Harper. Saraf got the ability to pass over the top of the defense. He's got very similar characteristics and traits to Dylan Harper in a lot of ways, but he's a worse finisher at the rim. He's a less reliable three-point shooter, which is why Saraf goes 12 picks lower in this mock draft than where Dylan Harper is going. But I still think Saraf has significant potential. He is a little left-handed dependent, and like I mentioned earlier with Jakucionis, maybe a little screen dependent as well. The first step with a live handle in isolation, maybe not the best, but still good enough to get by, I think. And that's why I think Saraf here, 16th overall, would be a very good long-term swing for the Jazz at this spot in the draft. Pick 17, the Brooklyn Nets on the clock here now. This pick comes from the Milwaukee Bucks through the New York Knicks, part of the Mikal Bridges trade, of course, and now 17th overall. Brooklyn has a chance to continue adding talent. Remember, they had a pick in the top 10 earlier with the 6th overall pick, and now here 17th overall. I have the Brooklyn Nets adding to VJ Edgecombe by taking wing Adou Thiero out of Arkansas. I referenced him earlier, said we were going to mention him later in this mock draft. Here he is now, a player I am fascinated with. His BPM is through the roofs right now. His net rating is plus 34.0 on the season. So the Razorbacks are 34 points better than their opponents when Adou Thiero is on the court per game, which is just incredible. He is an awesome player and has really developed as a true junior in college basketball. First year with Kentucky as a freshman, didn't have a ton of opportunities, did flash a little bit. His second season with Kentucky, the stock numbers were through the roof, the steal percentage specifically. And this year for Arkansas, he's doing a little bit of everything. I talked earlier about Boogie, Fland finding cutters. Adou Thiero has been a high volume cutter for them. Now, listen, he's not shooting the three ball very well at all. He's in the 20s for three-point percentage, which is why he's not a top 10, top 14 pick in this draft. But at 17th overall, his play finishing, his two-point percentage, which is really attractive in the 60+% area territory. He's been really productive in a specific niche and role. And the player that I just get reminded of when I watch him, he's not going to be as good as this guy in the NBA, but OG Anunoby, another player who wasn't a top pick, played for Indiana, right? Like, Adou Thiero is a guy who I think if he's going to model or emulate his game after someone, he should look at OG Anunoby as the blueprint. He's got similar physical gifts. He's athletic. He jumps out of the gym. He's extremely positionally strong. He's got a lot of functional tools that will translate really well to being a good NBA player. Adou Thiero is a guy I'm extremely high on. I'm sure you can hear it in my voice as I talk about him, how excited as an NBA draft prospect I am to have him in this year's class after a couple of years of, we weren't really sure what we were going to get out of Adou Thiero from his first couple of years in Kentucky. He's not a player, that I had really even considered for the 2024 NBA draft, just given how his season had played out for the Wildcats. And now after transferring to Arkansas, everything has clicked. He's really popped off in a big way for the Razorbacks, and he's been instrumental in their winning this season, and he's been a player who's really climbed up draft boards in a very big way. Pick number 18, the Oklahoma City Thunder here on the clock after a pick swap with the LA Clippers. And this seems like a no-brainer pick for the Thunder. Not only did they go with Derik earlier, so they no longer need an extra center, I think at 18, you're just looking for front court, you're looking for length, and you're looking for 3-and-D three-point shooting that can fit right in your roster around your superstar MVP level caliber player in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. That player is forward Alex Karaban from UConn, the two-time national champion, true junior. We have back-to-back true juniors going 17th and 18th in this draft. Alex Karaban is an awesome player and honestly one of the most overlooked players in the entire NBA draft right now. And I don't really understand it. Yes, he's a little bit of an older prospect. Yes, he doesn't have an elite handle. He's not going to be an on-ball player. Yes, the ceiling is pretty hard-capped. He doesn't have a great free throw rate. All of the advanced numbers don't suggest that Alex Karaban is going to be a star or a superstar or anything close to it. What I can assure you right now, and I would put significant money on this if I was into betting, Alex Karaban is going to be a good NBA player, a very, very solid NBA player, someone who is going to have a very long career. My comparison for him has been Nick Batum, and not the Nick Batum of the Portland Trailblazers where he was doing a little bit of everything as a young player, really athletic. I more so look at him as kind of the LA Clippers version of Nick Batum, where he's kind of a stocks wizard, does a little bit of everything. He's the next pass kind of guy, makes the right reads. He doesn't really have this huge impact where he goes on, 12-point swings all by himself. But what he does is just make the right play all the time. And Alex Karaban has those same traits. He's shooting 43% from three this year. He's been an absolute laser for UConn, not only this year, but over the last couple of years, been really instrumental around some of their non-shooters with Donovan Clingan, Stephon Castle over the last couple of years. Obviously, meshed really well with Jordan Hawkins as another wing shooter for them. He started so many games. He has so much high leverage experience, and he's also a stocks machine. He's got an incredibly long wingspan. I believe he measured in with a 7'2" wingspan at the 2024 NBA Draft Combine before withdrawing his name from the 2024 NBA Draft. I thought he would have been a first-round pick in 2024 had he kept his name in, but nonetheless, with him in the 2025 draft more than likely, I think OKC here gets an awesome player, a player who really fits into their system, as another guy who can just be another extender of their offense, and also a guy who can be a play finisher as a three-point shooter, something I still think OKC, if they level up to the best level of themselves over the next couple of years, which is scary to think that they can get even better, which I do think they can, they're going to have just better shooting. And Alex Karaban's a guy who he can guard. He's going to be a very, very impactful team defender. He'll never make an all-defense team, but he's honestly a player who's going to just be an awesome defender for a long time. He's just going to be really good. This is the type of player, if Oklahoma City gets, everyone in the NBA should be a little scared, a little upset, and like, how do we keep letting this happen? It's one of my biggest gripes with the NBA draft. Teams don't draft good basketball players. Teams don't draft good shooters, even though we all know how important three-point shooting is. It's honestly ludicrous. It honestly drives me crazy in these mock drafts. I have to mock what I think is going to happen, not what I would just do. Alex Karaban's a really good player. He's a player if a contender gets, everyone should be rolling their eyes, shaking their head, and saying, why do we let this happen year after year after year after year? The NBA let it happen with AJ Mitchell. I told everyone that was going to be scary. It's been scary. Teams need to stop letting this stuff happen. Alex Karaban's going to be awesome for the Thunder. I really love this pick for OKC, who stays on the clock with pick number 19 here now from the Miami Heat. We'll see what happens with the Jimmy Butler drama. But it looks like the Thunder are going to have this pick given its lottery protection. 19th overall, the Oklahoma City Thunder selecting wing LeBaron Philon from Alabama. And this is a prospect where maybe it'll take a little bit longer for him to really find his niche in the NBA. The three-point shooting has kind of been up and down this year for the Crimson Tide a bit, but the impact, the winning plays that he has made have not been up and down. It's been very consistent, very reliable for the Crimson Tide. I think he's been a real bright spot this year for Bama, and a player that, listen, after going with a guy who's probably a little bit more NBA ready than Alex Karaban, the Thunder, given how much of their rotation is already kind of set in stone, how many good players they have under contract presently, they're not looking for someone to play 20, 30 minutes a night necessarily. And especially after drafting Alex Karaban, I think LeBaron Philon is going to be an awesome G League player the first year if he goes to a team as loaded as OKC, because it'll give Philon a real chance to continue expanding his game, continue growing as a player, developing his tools. I think play finishing is one of the more unique areas of his game. Coming into the next level will be fascinating to see how great he can be as a play finisher and kind of this, unique guard wing prospect who he's probably never going to be a lead ball handler, but he can cut, do a lot of different things, defend up and down the lineup a little bit. Just offers more versatility for OKC, as down the road they'll probably have some tough decisions to make about contracts given the CBA rules. Pick 20, Atlanta back on the clock again here with this pick coming from the Los Angeles Lakers, part of their DeJounte Murray trade to New Orleans, of course. And now Atlanta here, 20th overall, after going with Egor Demin at pick 15, have a chance to add more talent here. 20th overall of the Atlanta Hawks select forward Colin Murray-Boyles from South Carolina. And I talked about the heliocentric style of play, the utilization of the short roller, the utilization of non-shooters, and how Quinn Snyder's making it all work in Atlanta. Colin Murray-Boyles is one of the more fascinating prospects because he's a 6'7" power forward who doesn't shoot a lot of threes, doesn't make a lot of threes. He has a negative assist-to-turnover ratio. How can this guy be good in the NBA? That's what a lot of people are going to be asking when you look at it from just a plain theory standpoint. This is not the type of player that, one, first of all, looks like an obvious NBA awesome player as a power forward, and two, he doesn't seem from an analytics perspective like a guy who's going to fit in today's modern game as much. But if he lands in a situation around a shooter like Trae Young, around some perimeter talent who can utilize some of his other skills as a play finisher, as a unique driver of the basketball, I think, one thing that makes Jalen Johnson so awesome in Atlanta is his explosion toward the rim, his ability to play above the rim vertically, and obviously his touch as well. Colin Murray-Boyles doesn't have the necessarily athletic tools that are going to make him awesome in that role, but he has very good touch. He's got some significant functional play strength. He actually has a little bit of talent with his back to the basket as well. And I think as the NBA spacing kind of stretches the floor out for him a little bit and opens up the game, I think we're going to see that assist-to-turnover ratio kind of improve slowly and become less of a negative on his overall player profile. So I think for Atlanta here specifically, after getting Egor Demin, another creator for your offense, which I think is necessary, you have kind of a fun pick to use at your disposal here, and Colin Murray-Boyles is a guy who I think could fit into their offensive system for sure. And I think with the way that things have been flowing defensively for them, the speed that they play with, the activity level defensively, Colin Murray-Boyles, his functional strength could maybe play a positive impact in that regard as well. Pick 21, the Indiana Pacers, who have been one of the hottest teams in the entire NBA, just took down the Cleveland Cavaliers a couple nights ago, which is a rarity. Cleveland has not lost much this season, so Indiana accomplishing that feat has been awesome. And also, Tyrese Haliburton has been awesome as of late. I tried telling everybody it's part of the hamstring, it's part of the back. He's injured. The beginning of the year was not pretty for Tyrese Haliburton. He's starting to get back to normal. He's back to the player that we all know him to be, which is an all-NBA caliber player, one of the better guards in the entire NBA, and Indiana has reaped some of the benefits of that as well. Pascal Siakam has been playing really well as of the last couple of weeks. 21st overall, the Pacers here select guard Nolan Traore from France. So Indiana's fascinating. Thomas Bryant has worked really, really well there. Maybe they just keep Thomas Bryant. Maybe they extend or re-sign Miles Turner this offseason. We'll see what happens there. But center is obviously something I think Indiana could look at in the draft. Given the injuries to both Isaiah Jackson and James Wiseman this past season, or earlier this season, excuse me. But I think Indiana, the other option that they have if they don't go center is to go upside. And Nolan Traore coming, if you go back to my way too early mock draft at the very beginning of the cycle, the day after the 2024 NBA draft concluded, I was extremely optimistic about Nolan Traore. We had seen so many great things from him professionally last year, and he just hasn't been able to build on that as much this season. The efficiencies are all down. The turnovers are up. Everything has been a little out of whack for him. But I still think there's a player there. And a team like Indiana specifically, with Haliburton there, they have a really good track record of developing young guards. You think about Nembhard, his development over the last couple of years. Nolan Traore playing for Rick Carlisle, I think, could really be maximized. I think, Carlisle obviously has some gripes with young players, doesn't play young players a ton. I think there's good data behind that decision a lot of times, even though it can be very infuriating for fans throughout the course of a year or 2 years or every single year, basically. Even though that can be infuriating, they're still offering developmental opportunities with the Fort Wayne Mad Ants. They're giving play time in different ways. They're using practice time to focus development. I think that's one of the things that really bothers me. Sometimes fans seem to think that players can't develop if they don't play in games. Well, I do think playing in games can be a functional tool for players to develop. It's not always essential. We see it in the NFL all the time. Aaron Rodgers, Jordan Love, the Packers get praised for having their young QB sit. Patrick Mahomes sat for pretty much the entire first season of his career behind Alex Smith. Not playing doesn't mean there's no development. You can still use film, you can use practice time, you can use G League games. There's so many opportunities for young players to develop. And even though Nolan Traore probably honestly wouldn't have a real role with Indiana early in his career, just given the amount of talent this team has and their current guard play situation as it is, this is a significant long-term talent upside grab for a player who a couple months ago we thought was going to be a top 4, top 5 pick in the 2025 NBA draft. Pick 22, my Dallas Mavericks. Love to talk about the Mavs here. They have been trying to stay afloat with Kyrie and Luka Doncic both out at this current point in time. It's been a little bit of a rough stretch for Dallas, but things are hopefully looking up come playoff time. I think with Luka back and the team kind of getting back into their normal flow, everything will work really, really well. The Mavericks here 22nd overall. I have them taking wing Hugo Gonzalez from Spain. His ACB play has been, I think, improving dramatically throughout the course of the season. He's also started to see some actual more regular minutes on occasion, which has been good as well. And I think from an actual developmental standpoint, what you're looking at Hugo Gonzalez to be, and if you go back to some of his FIBA U18 play, what you're really hoping for is this unique play creation, play finishing type of wing who can do just a little bit of everything for you and can have his hand in winning by playing with the ball a bit, playing without the ball, playing off the ball, kind of the combination of feel, shooting, handle a little bit. There's just a lot of small micro tools for a team to work with, and I think for Dallas specifically, you look at the current collection of contracts on the roster, they're going to keep PJ Washington, Klay Thompson, Daniel Gafford, Derik Lively, Luka Doncic, Kyrie Irving, Quentin Grimes has been a real standout for them. There's not a lot of minutes really for the Mavericks to offer to young players. We've kind of seen that with Omax Prosper, who hasn't played a ton either. The Mavericks don't have 20, 30 minutes to kind of give out leisurely to a young player. So a guy like Hugo Gonzalez, who maybe needs a little bit more development, he could be a guy that makes sense for Dallas to invest in if they feel like he could be a good long-term fit next to Luka. And I think when it comes to overseas talent, Hugo Gonzalez might be one of the best players remaining on the board at this point in time. Pick 23, the Orlando Magic here now, a team that is extremely well coached. Jamal Mosley is one of the better coaches in the entire NBA. And the ability to stay afloat throughout the course of the season after losing scorer after scorer after scorer. Paulo Banchero first out. Then Franz Wagner goes down. Then Mo Wagner goes down. It just feels like everything and the kitchen sink has been thrown at the Magic this year. And what do? They win basketball games. And that's just, first of all, a sign of great coaching, but it's also a real sign and indication of the overall talent level and the depth that this team has and the quality of scheme and system. They have a very good defensive infrastructure. So on nights where they can't score the basketball as efficiently or as effectively as they would like to, they still are able to find ways to stronghold games, strangle out other teams, and ultimately win. And that's what Orlando does a lot of. And also their roster composition, having two really high quality on-ball forwards like Franz Wagner, like Paulo Banchero, gives them some real flexibility to add unique talent on their roster. That's exactly what we're going to do here with not one, but two of their first-round picks in this mock draft. The Orlando Magic at pick 23 select guard Jace Richardson from Michigan State. One of the big questions for him, a player who doesn't have elite positional size by any stretch of the imagination, as kind of a smaller usage, low usage player who isn't going to be a primary lead guard for a team who's a bit smaller. Where does he fit in the NBA? The answer is pretty simple. He fits next to either jumbo playmakers or skilled forwards. He could fit in Boston next to Jason Tatum, who's going to handle the rock a lot. He could fit next to Luka Doncic in Dallas, who I considered at pick 22. He can fit next to Paulo Banchero, Franz Wagner in Orlando. And if you look at him from an actual production standpoint this year for Michigan State, he's been awesome. The son of Jason Richardson, the BPM is through the roof. Everything has been really, really awesome. The impact has been undeniable. People, yes, there's fair concerns about translation to the NBA, but I think for Orlando specifically, a team that already has so much of their offense built into their forwards, in their offense, I think that Jace Richardson's a guy who could fit in pretty well. This is one of the better destinations and landing spots, in my opinion, for Jace Richardson in the 2025 NBA draft. Pick 24, we are staying on the Orlando Magic. This pick comes from the Denver Nuggets, part of the Aaron Gordon trade from a few years ago. And 24th overall, Orlando's going to continue to get funky here. They're going to draft another Big Ten player, back-to-back Big Ten alert, forward/center Danny Wolf from Michigan. And I am extremely excited to talk about this guy in this mock draft. A left-handed freak for Michigan. He is awesome. Played last year for Yale. He's one of the more unique draft prospects we've seen in the last 5-10 years. He is a 6'10", 6'11", big man who is left-handed, has a ton of playmaking feel, and I mean a ton. A really creative passer, of course, has that size to see over the top of defenses, and is playing next to Vladislav Golden there for the Wolverines as well. So he's playing next to another big man. And you would think in the year 2025, is that going to work? The Wolverines have been really, really effective with that kind of play for Dusty May. So I've been really impressed with Michigan this season, and a lot of their offense stems from Danny Wolf. Now, again, he's very left-handed. Most of his success is going to stem from going to his left hand, and if he's driving right, he's probably going to spin back to his left hand. That is a negative. As teams get smarter, as teams get to know these players better, especially going into the future, maybe as a rookie, he's going to get away with it a bit, but going into playoff series in the future, teams are going to know, listen, he's left-handed. He's going to go to his left. He's going to try and get to his left a ton. And that is a negative for him. But the fact that he has such great size and unique positional flexibility where he might play the 4, he might even be best playing the 4, I think this has some shades of how Mo Wagner's been awesome for Orlando, offering multiple lineup versatilities where you can play him at center, you can play him as a 4. And one thing that Danny Wolf has that I think Mo Wagner maybe doesn't quite have as much is different playstyle functionalities where Danny Wolf can be your DHO hub. You can trigger dribble handoffs. And maybe this is a good way to alleviate some of the pressure from Paulo Banchero and Franz Wagner being sole initiators, primary creators for your offense. With Danny Wolf on the floor, there's ways to utilize him in different lineups. You can play him next to a Mo Wagner. You can play him next to a Wendell Carter. You can play him next to Goga Bitadze, who's been awesome this season. You could play him next to Paulo and Franz and Jalen Suggs and KCP if you wanted to, and play Wolf as your center because of how good your perimeter defense is. I think Orlando's got so much flexibility right now and so many versatile options that they can go in the draft because of who they already have on their roster and their style of play and their team defense. Danny Wolf's one of those interesting grabs where he wouldn't work in every situation, but the feel, the size, the touch, and the IQ specifically, even though he is very turnover prone right now, there's so many flashes of brilliance from him as a playmaker passer that there's just some real dynamism and awesome things that he can provide to an NBA offense that not every big man prospect in this year's draft can even come close to offering. Moving on here now to pick number 25, the Memphis Grizzlies, a team that is just built to win games. It's exactly what this team does. Ja Morant, I think, is still a 1A caliber player. He's an elite dynamo downhill. Jaren Jackson Jr. having a career season for himself. Zach Edey, don't look away, could still win Rookie of the Year. Obviously, Alex Sarr's had some awesome moments. Even his teammate Jalen Wells has been tremendous. The Grizzlies have a ton of depth. They have a lot of young talent. And they get to add to that here. 25th overall, I have the Memphis Grizzlies selecting guard Ian Jackson from UNC. And I think for the Grizzlies, the breakout of Scottie Pippen Jr. makes it so that the Grizz don't need a number 2 point guard. They don't need a second guy to be an initiator behind Ja Morant because of who Scottie Pippen Jr. has become for them. But I think just looking for more athleticism in their backcourt, looking for another guy who can make plays for them. Out of the guard spot, we'll see what happens with Marcus Smart and his future there in Memphis. The Grizzlies, again, probably aren't looking for a high minutes per game guy. Whoever the Grizzlies draft will probably end up working really well for them. And I think that's, first of all, a testament to the coaching by Taylor Jenkins. And then secondly, a testament to the overall talent around them. Having players like John Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr., and Desmond Bane around you does make your life easier as a young player in the NBA. And I think Ian Jackson's someone who has some real fascinating upside from an athlete perspective. He's also shooting the ball relatively well this season for UNC too. I think that's been a real positive surprise for a lot of people. So Ian Jackson's a guy who I think is going to be on the first round radar for a majority of teams. The Grizzlies here at 25. Listen, again, it's not a team that's going to be able to offer 25, 30 minutes of play right away, but Ian Jackson's the type of player who I think over time with some real progression into his NBA offensive skills specifically and kind of better application of his athleticism defensively could be a very long-term intriguing two-way player for the Grizzlies moving forward. Pick 26, OKC back on the clock again after already drafting Derek Queen, after drafting both Alex Karaban and LeBaron Philon. The Thunder on the clock one more time here. Draft wing Andre Stojakovic from California. I have been enamored with Andre Stojakovic as a draft prospect for a while. Someone who I had on my radar for the 2024 NBA draft as a true freshman out of Stanford. Now, he had a little bit of an up and down season for the Cardinal. Didn't end up coming out for the 2024 NBA draft. Instead, transferred to California and has filled the roles of 2024 NBA draft first round pick Jalen Tyson by really becoming an awesome offensive player for the Bears this season, averaging over 20 points per game, shooting over 35% from three. Of course, he is the son of NBA star Peja Stojakovic, one of the better NBA three-point shooters for his time. And I think Andre Stojakovic, with his positional size standing around 6'7", 6'8" maybe, he's going to be a guy who I think translates really easily and smoothly to the NBA because of his ability to function as a multiple play style type of guy. You can use him off of handoffs. You can have him initiate a little bit of offense out of isolation. He can be your standstill catch and shoot guy. He is going to be, I think, a sniper from the corner specifically. When he gets to the NBA, I think his corner three-point shot is going to be one of the biggest standout skills for him. Just something that right now in Cal and at Stanford didn't have a ton of those opportunities, but I think just looking at him in the NBA when he kind of reverts to a role player type of role, yeah, maybe he doesn't have the rhythm that he has now, maybe he doesn't have the reps, the volume, but I think his efficiencies and his accuracy is going to improve pretty dramatically, playing around guys who can generate closeouts like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, like Jalen Williams, like Chet Holmgren, and a passer like Isaiah Hartenstein. The rich get richer here in this draft. If OKC walks out with the four players I've had them drafted in Derek Queen, Andre Stojakovic, Alex Karaban, and LeBaron Philon, oh my goodness. This is an A-plus draft for OKC, and I really love Andre Stojakovic. I think just the production he's had for Cal this year has been really astounding and honestly very impressive and honestly not surprising either. I just think he's a first-round level prospect. I was on that trend before anybody else. I think at this point in time, some other people are starting to really catch on and say, wait, maybe there is a real NBA player here. And that's what Andre Stojakovic is going to be. He's going to be, I think, a guy who has at least an 8 to 10 year career in the NBA. Not only does he have the connections through his father, I'm sure, but he's also got the talent to stand out and honestly stick in the NBA for quite some time. Pick 27, Brooklyn on the clock once again here. They've gone earlier with the combination of VJ Edgecombe and Adou Thiero getting two of the most athletic prospects in the 2025 NBA draft. Now with this pick coming from the Knicks, 27th overall, I have them drafting wing Dink Pate from the G League. Obviously was part of the G League Ignite program, now has been playing for the Mexico City Capitanes. He's an interesting draft prospect for a variety of different reasons. If you think about the shot diet, the pull-up jump shot, and at times for his G League Ignite film, if we go back a couple of years, really had some emergences as a playmaker, and a lot of that stemmed from his scoring gravity. Now, I think for Brooklyn, we've gone pretty guard heavy here for them, pretty smaller player heavy, but I think with how Noah Clowney's played, how Nick Claxton's played, I do think that they feel like they have some real semblance of their long-term front court there in Brooklyn. And I think adding in perimeter talent, adding in shot-making talent like what Dink Pate can provide, gives the Nets an interesting young core nucleus of players to really focus developmentally on, something we haven't seen the Nets be able to do because of the amount of picks they've traded away over the last decade plus there in Brooklyn. The Boston Celtics here now at pick number 28. a team obviously littered with three-point shooters. Baylor Shireman, I think over time will really start to stand out as well. I loved him in the 2024 NBA draft, and the Celtics have a chance to continue implementing and adding to their roster. First of all, I want to also hype up Peyton Pritchard. He's been awesome for the Boston Celtics this year. A player that I think really could have a significant role somewhere else if he ever were to get traded. We'll see if that ever actually materializes or not. But 28th overall for the Boston Celtics. They love to shoot threes. That's how Joe Mazzulla wants them to play. That's what Brad Stevens is going to continue to do for him. Give him shooters. That's exactly what the Celtics here do at pick 28. 28th overall, I have the Boston Celtics selecting wing Kobe Brea from Kentucky. He ripped my heart out. Former Dayton Flyer, transferred out. He was dynamite with Deron Holmes II, obviously first-round pick in the 2024 draft. For the Denver Nuggets, unfortunately ruptured his Achilles, so has missed this season up to this point. But Kobe Brea really shined next to Holmes, playing off of dribble handoffs, playing off of high ball screens. He's an elite pull-up three-point shooter. This guy has been hovering around 50% from three, not only this season, but also last season. He is one of the best shooters in the entire draft, if not the best shooter in the draft. And the fact that this guy's not talked about more in the first round doesn't really make any sense to me. Like, yeah, is he a lottery pick? No. He's going to be like 23 years old, okay? But he's also awesome at shooting the ball. And everyone, like, that's the whole discussion around the NBA right now. Are teams shooting too many threes? Are three-pointers too valuable? Are they too important? And then yet we get in the draft and I'm talking about a bunch of guys shooting 22% from three. It doesn't make sense. It really doesn't. Kobe Brea is lapping guys in terms of three-point percentage right now. He is unbelievable. And it's on difficult volume. It's on pull-ups. It's on handoffs. It's on movement. It's impressive. He's got elite range. This guy is an NBA player and he's an elite shooter. This kind of reminds me of Sam Hauser, who did not get drafted. He was like completely overlooked despite being an awesome shooter. There's a ton of other examples throughout college basketball over the last 5 years of guys I can think of that I'm like, this guy should probably be on an NBA team because he can shoot. And they end up not getting on NBA teams, which is just mind-blowing to me. Kobe Brea should be on an NBA team. He should probably be a first-round pick. And he might not be, right? He might not be, but I think he should be. And Boston, a team that loves to shoot threes, this is the type of player that would fit right in to their system around the Jays and around their other awesome talent there in Boston. Pick number 29, the LA Clippers here now. This pick, remember, was a swap with the Thunder. The Thunder had, I believe it was pick 18 or 19. I think it was 18 in this mock draft. And now the Clippers have 29 as a result of this swap from the Paul George trade. But still a first-round pick and one that I think could be very, very, very valuable for the Clippers. One of their biggest problems throughout the course of the season, I've harped on it already in multiple videos in the past, they have the worst high-volume player in the league in Kevin Porter Jr. He is not good. And the Clippers, when James Harden's out of the game, need someone who can handle the ball, make reads, make plays, and score. They can get that here, 29th overall. And you might be saying, 29th overall, why is this guy still on the board if he can do all of those things? Teams don't like drafting good basketball players. It's just not what they do. 29th overall, I have the Clippers selecting Mark Sears from Alabama. He is an awesome basketball player. He is one of the better college basketball players in the world. And he has started to play like that again as of late. Over the last 3 weeks or so has just been brilliant for the Crimson Tide. He is their best offensive player. He's small. He's an older prospect. There's all of these negatives. The thing is, all of those negatives are what led people to not drafting Jalen Brunson in the first round. Jalen Brunson was a second-round pick by the Dallas Mavericks in 2018. They walked away in a draft with Luka Doncic third overall and Jalen Brunson in the 30s. And the reason that happened is because teams valued upside over talent. They valued potential over skill. And doing those things does not make sense. Okay, Mark Sears is a very good player and he has potential because he has a lot of functional tools to build on. He's got a very good pull-up game. He's got tremendous footwork. People are going to say he's small. He's not NBA sized. He's been small his whole life, okay? He's been small in college basketball. Doesn't play small though. He plays huge because he's a big-time player. And this type of big-time player is someone who I think could really elevate the Clippers long-term, especially, at some point they're going to have to go to life post-Harden and Kawhi. And when they get there, someone like Mark Sears could be a real stabilizing force for that transition. And right now could be an awesome off-the-bench player for them. And Mark Sears is a guy who, if I'm the Clippers, if he's available, I'm looking at this and I'm running this up to the podium and saying, please give us Mark Sears. Our team just got a lot better at basketball today the moment we drafted him. I think he's going to be a good player in the NBA, a very reliable, sound player in the NBA, and someone the Clippers would be very, very happy selecting at the end of the first round here. Leading us to pick 30, the Utah Jazz on the clock for the third time in this first round. Really excited to talk about Utah one more time here. Adding to their young nucleus of players, remember we drafted Ben Saraf earlier. We also went with Trey Johnson out of Texas. 30th overall now, I have the Utah Jazz selecting wing Will Riley from Illinois. I think this is, again, a very good upside pick for Utah. A player who, I think with how young he is, the shot diet, the potential really points to some significant upside as a player and a shooter specifically. Now, over the last couple of games, part of why he's fallen in this mock draft, I've typically had him in kind of the mid-teens, maybe a little bit lower teens, like pick 18 or so. He's fallen to pick 30 here because his minutes have been slashed a bit over the last couple of weeks for Illinois. His production hasn't been pretty either. Had a 2 for 11 game, I believe. I think a 1 for 5 game. Just hasn't been the most productive player for the Fighting Illini, while Kasparas Jakucionis has been easily their best freshman. Will Riley, who I think a lot of people had high expectations for, hasn't really stood out as much as I think we all wanted him to, but there's still enough tools and traits and shot making here to warrant a pick at number 30. We saw it last year when the Jazz at 29 took Isaiah Collier, the former number 1 overall recruit. It would not shock me here to see Danny Ainge take an upside swing on someone like Will Riley, who was, again, a highly touted prospect, a player who coming in, I think a lot of people were hoping could be a 12, 13, 14, 15 point per game scorer for Illinois on good efficiencies. It hasn't quite played out that way, but he also hasn't been a huge negative player either for the duration of the season. There's been moments where he's been a vastly negative player, but he's also had some awesome moments for the Fighting Illini. He has a pretty significantly positive BPM still. He's not been a bad player by any stretch. Now, even though his minutes are being reduced a bit and his production hasn't been up to par as of late, he's still been a good college basketball player, and I think that's at the forefront of why he's still warranting a first-round selection in the 2025 NBA Draft. Really hope you guys did enjoy. If you did, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Hit that notification bell for more uploads. Thanks again all so much for watching. Don't forget to comment your favorite team down below. Also, let me know your favorite prospect in the 2025 draft. That'll be the little secret here if you get to the end of the video. Let me know your favorite 2025 NBA draft prospect. Thanks all so much for watching, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.